team, I can, okay, Peter, can you send contacts to us and we will put them in the chat once again?
Yeah,
okay, I'll put some. Okay, thank you, Piotr. Okay, and I'm very happy, well, actually, to introduce our next speaker, Marina Bocharova. Marina is here. Yeah, okay, I could. Yeah, I can see you. Okay, very good.
Hello, everybody.
Marina has been teaching English for over 20 years at Voronezh State University, as well as in the corporate IT setting and her own online projects. She's a PhD and Cambridge CP certificate holder and senior lecturer in linguistics. She promotes game-based learning, designs multi-episode role plays for her business English course, and runs a course for teachers who share her experience. Well, actually, Marina is going to tell you right now about, well, just great idea of turning role plays games into a series of vice versa, about turning a series of lessons, yeah, into a role play game. And I really like Marina's approach to game design and to English teaching. So a very good expert, real professional. Okay, so just enjoy. Let's greet. First of all, let's greet Marina with our smiles.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Thank you for such a great introduction, Elena, and thanks for having me. Right, so I would just like to share my presentation and just say a few words about the topic of my talk today. Right, so just a couple of words about myself and why I got interested in using games and why it happened to be for business English classes. Well, you know, business English is just because that's what I've been mostly focusing on in the last few years. A decade rather. That's one reason. Besides that, business English is very often associated with something which is, you know, quite boring and where students have to learn a lot of vocabulary which is pretty specific. At the same time, what I wanted to show my students is that it doesn't have to be boring. It can be fun and very productive and efficient at the same time. That's why I've started developing role-playing games, but in a a larger scale format. Obviously, I started with something which I could take from teachers' resource books, and I could find something which fitted perfectly to some topics. But as it appeared later, it wasn't that perfect. Sometimes it didn't go well. Sometimes the students lacked the fun, because that was more like functional, practicing certain functions. That's why I started developing my own games for my business English classes. And by now I've got 4 of them. The probably first and biggest one with like the largest number of episodes is the Big London Meetup. And this role-playing game is going to be the case study for today. Well, but basically we're going to concentrate on how to boost speaking skills by designing your own multi-episode role plays, not just by using what we already have, and how this designing your own role plays is in different ways better, although time-consuming, but still better and more efficient, because how it can fit the purpose. Well, you know, when yesterday I completed my presentation, I was so proud of myself. Great, I've done it. I've got a really good presentation. But, you know, this morning I thought back and understood, wow, 45 slides. What was I thinking about? So it looks like now I'll try to focus more on the essence and the reasons why your own role-playing games that you create might be really better, and how the format that I suggest is slightly different from tabletop role-playing games, because what I do is not exactly tabletop role-playing games, and how this is different from simple dramatization or acting out dialogues with preset roles where there is no space for creativity or freedom of choice. So I'll try to show how this is different, and we'll focus on the what's like what I mean by a multi-episode role-playing game, the hows, and the whys. Okay, good. So, well, if you have any questions, please feel free to write them in the chat. I can't promise to answer them straight away, but I'll be keeping an eye on it. Good. So let's start with the what. So what I try to do is combine 3 types of formats. I really try to invent or find an interesting story, break it into a few episodes, thus creating a series where each episode finishes, with some hook, keeping my students in suspense about what's going to happen next and willing to get the task for their next episode. And then reformatting it into a role play. Would you like to have a glimpse? Because I've got some samples here for you. I'm going to play some little bits and pieces from my classes, and you'll see how it might happen, how it's different from students sitting and just talking. I hope you will have the sound, but it's not the most important thing. Anyway, one moment. So this was a tiny sample of the episode where, well, some delegates arrive for a business conference, and some of them have already registered, while others haven't. And let me just give you, okay, so the girl here sitting at the desk here, she's the receptionist, she's the person at the registration desk, and there are some others still waiting to register for the conference. Yeah, buzzing sound, yeah. Okay, here's another example.
Yeah, welcome to Oh, very nice house. Yes, thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, yes. Yeah, well, this is Tatiana Smirnova, and this is, oh no, I'm sorry.
Well, you can see that they are not sitting. Yeah, they're walking around, although here you could see some students sitting down, well, somewhere in the background. Or maybe that's not very obvious, but sometimes in certain episodes, there are students sitting down and observing, just because not all episodes can be made for up to 12 students. Well, this is a pretty challenging task to design an episode where all the 12 or 14 of them are equally involved. And where there is some action happening, where they have their tasks to do, their goals to, complete. Okay, and one more little glimpse. This is not a video. Here they are sitting finally, because, well, this is a dinner party, closing one after all the events of like business events, yeah? So the final day of the 2-day conference is where the participants already know each other quite well, and they are acting out. The girl here, in the very background, has this very interesting expression on her face, because that was her decision to play the role of someone who is very talkative because she's been drinking and she's a bit tipsy and very happy to chat a lot. And well, it was a lot of fun. So actually, the students and some other students who do such role plays really remember it as some of the brightest moments on their course. So these are a couple of samples. Let's move on to the whys. What's the point of actually taking all the trouble, going to such lengths, spending all this time and effort, intellectual effort, and creating your own role plays? Do you have any ideas? Well, I mean, maybe you see no point. Could you please share your ideas in the chat box? Because on the one hand, there are so many readily available role plays that you can find in teachers' resource books. Well, like you can see some samples here. Right, there are a lot of them, and basically it's quite possible, whichever topic you do, well, more or less, to find something which suits this topic. But yes, it might not really suit your students. The exact stage of the topic or the work that you are doing on particular skills, it might not suit a lot of the things. Yes, absolutely. Yes, oh, thank you very much. I really like your ideas about the personalized approach to meet the students' needs, connecting in a very practical way to what is being taught in class and to what has been taught already in your course. Yes, it's really inspiring. It's very motivating because before that, obviously I tried, and from time to time, even now, I have some, well, just borrow someone else's ideas. I cut out some printed out cards and bring them into class, but the effect is really different because things have to be personalized, absolutely. Well, and well, after each either game or typically course, at the end of the semester or academic year, I ask my students' opinion. And what they like is the spontaneity, creativity. They really appreciate that the situations which I offer are very close to real life, and not the real life they have now, because they're still students and most of them have no experience of operating in business contexts, but it's a kind of, again, glimpse of what might happen to them in the future, because they all are going to work in the business environment later, well, most of them at least. What was surprising for me here in what they said was that they like the observation and self-observation plus self-assessment. So, as I said, in certain episodes, some of them have to be sitting down and just observing the others, acting something out according to the tasks they have and the role cards they have. And, well, it might look like they are observing the others. At the same time, when they start acting things out and performing actively, they somehow observe what they are doing, and later they are able to reflect on that. When we start discussing that later, they always say that it was so great that, for example, I was able to do this and that. I couldn't have thought I would be able to do that. Or sometimes, well, how could have I forgotten to say this or to act in a certain way? So, well, I know this in theory, but why haven't I done that in practice? So this also happens, and that means that they will pay attention and try not to do the same later, or with practice, it will just go away. Right, and fun is definitely one thing they like a lot about it. Plus, well, I'm not going to give another screenshot here, but they usually say that next year, in the next academic year, they want more role-playing games, more and more. So, well, that's really, addictive, isn't it? Good. And now, very quickly, basically, you already have given your answers. So what are the benefits of role-playing as a teaching tools, especially, well, because some of the most obvious ones are mentioned here, and we've been talking a lot about this today. I mean, not just me, but the other speakers who have been talking already. But as for those role plays that we create for our students, for our course, that's personalization. That's providing practice in the context that we know they will most probably have to, well, find themselves in later in their life. Any other ideas about the benefits of such, targeted and customized role plays? Because mostly we can just take the answers that you've given before in the chat box. Okay, let me just take a little pause and have a look at the questions here. So, do observers have to comment on what they saw? Thank you, Elena, for this great question. Yeah, so the role of an observer doesn't have to be a passive one, or rather it shouldn't be a passive one. Otherwise, it's so easy to distract for such people, yes, and think about something. Now I've introduced certain checklists, and we have certain categories in which observers give likes to those who act out. Not explicitly, so the people who are acting things out don't really know if they get likes, if they don't get likes, and there are certain categories or nominations in which they get likes, and all of them are relevant to the assessment criteria for my course, because I usually use this particular role-playing game to assess my students students at the end of the semester when all the relevant skills of networking, small talk, this kind of interaction in informal contexts in a business environment have already been practiced through different other tasks and smaller scale role plays. So observers can comment on that, I mean, explicitly, verbally later after we finish the complete series. We have a get-together, a sit-together, so to speak, and I ask them to say whatever they want to say. So I ask them for their verbal feedback, apart from, just filling in forms so that I know something which they might not want to speak about in front of their group mates. Yeah, so they might explain what they liked, what they were not quite happy about, about themselves or about the others, but not explicitly, because I don't want my students to criticize my other students, face to face. Right. So let me just have a look at some other comments. Observe and see things. So being a student to my group mates, you used to record all the role plays. So recordings work really, really well. Yes, especially when you look at them later and discuss what happened. Good. So let's get moving. And now we'll just run through very briefly through the hows. That is the different stages. Different stages of developing your own role-playing series. And this is, well, that's in Russian, I'm sorry, because, well, that's the present I'm going to share with you if you want to have this. But now I'm going to do this in English very briefly. Let's walk through all the different stages that are involved in creating your own role-playing games. And the illustrations will come from this particular game of mine. So, well, that's quite authentic, because on the left you can see how it might look in real life, and on the right, well, this is how it looks in my classroom. So people don't talk all together, they always split into many groups. And in step 1, yes, we have to define the target of the course that your role play meets. In my case, it's to boost interest and involvement, but mostly as for the course target, it's to practice and assess the skills of small talk, networking, and relationship building in realistic situations. Right, so the next stage, define the target audience, that is, who your students are, what level they have. Then define the learning outcomes of the role play that you are going to create. Again, in my case, it's improved hands-on business communication skills that I've already mentioned. Then we need to select the language, the skills, communicative strategies that you want to kind of, integrate into the game and that you want to test, or that you want your students to actually use when they speak English in the situations that you offer to them. Again, in my case, I just go through the plan of my course, the syllabus, all the materials that I have, and select the relevant ones. In the next stage, what we do is we choose the type and the format of the role play that we're thinking about. Again, the case in point is a story with a few episodes, an example of active game-based learning. After that, we need to think about the relevant game elements and game mechanics, select those which fit precisely what we are going to do and fit the goals. So today, obviously, well, that's a big topic, and obviously I will have no time to talk about the different options that exist here and how to select them. I just want to give you a very quick look at the stages. Well, next we have to think of the theme for your role play and create a legend. In my case, the legend is that all the students involved, all the players, work for the same multinational corporation called ABC Consulting, which is based in London but has subsidiaries in different countries of the world. And there are 5 countries, well, named, listed there. And for 3 days, they are all coming to London. They're all meeting in London for a big corporate meeting, and then for a conference, which is going to take 2 days. apart from the business event, there are going to be a lot of other networking opportunities and other informal events. So that's the basic legend. Then we should think about the game purpose and explain very clearly to our students how they can win. In my case, in the case of this game, the purpose of the game is to make new contacts, but not just to, meet new people. It's all about networking. So these new contacts have to have a clear potential for future partnerships, cooperation, or joint projects. So they discuss what exactly they can do together, apart from just chatting and doing small talk. And to win, they have to collect the largest number of business cards, and it only counts if this business card at the back has something written down by you as a player that this is the particular project that we're going to do together with this person who the business card belongs to. If that's not very clear, you can ask me a question and I will comment in a bit more detail. The second thing, which also counts in defining who the winner is or the winners are, is the likes they get from observers, anonymously. Good. In the next stage, we have to think which scenario will be best. That really depends on how your story develops, how much freedom of choice you want to give to your students, and which level your students are. Because there are different types of scenarios, and it's very important if it's branching to, for these branches to come together at different points again, because otherwise if you give them too much freedom of choice, they will just be playing their own games, and you as the game master or teacher might not be able to control the whole situation. So in my case, that's just the different events of which which you can find within this game about meeting in London meetup. They range from very informal, like meeting someone at an airport, checking in at a hotel, to talking to people before important meetings and in between conference talks. So the scenario is branching, but even if there are different branches, they always come together, and there is one line of events which leads them towards the final event in the game. Of course, we need to think about the plot for each episode and follow some typical, or maybe not very typical, structures where, the typical one is that there is one character and its antagonist who are in conflict. This main character has a goal he or she wants to achieve, but there is always an obstacle to overcome. But this one is for two characters. What if you have 12? So that's a more challenging task, and obviously that takes that has to be thought out in a bit more detail, in a lot more detail. This is what all of this put together looks like for the Big London meetup. So we have the timeline, we have different locations, different events and activities the participants engage in, and different characters with different types of relationships between them, some of whom know each other, some of whom do not. Well, it takes quite a long time to think it all over, but you can play this game again and again with the same students or a new group every year. After that, you need to help your students prepare. In my case, the preparation took most of the course, while then during the last 3 or 4 classes, we role play different episodes of this game, and this is a kind of test for them. But it's not filling in the gaps. It's a different kind of communicative format of test. And finally, you have to make all the necessary materials. If you do it offline in a classroom, then you have to get ready with character cards. You need business cards for them, role cards for each episode with clear tasks each character has to perform in this episode. If you have to do it online, well, actually, I don't really know how to do this particular role play online. I'm still thinking about it. But for other role plays, I have, well, I have reformatted them into the online format. So, well, you will have to create different Google slides and Google presentations. Well, that's just a sample of a role card I have and the types of information it has to have. But I suppose, well, we'll have to move over. And the final step probably will be to, when you come into the classroom and you're ready to play this game with them, obviously you explain and you show exactly where, well, they are now, what the legend is, and you give them time to prepare. Then the students act this out. And afterwards, it's actually up to you if you give feedback after each episode or after the whole role-playing series, if it doesn't take too long, of course. The types of feedback should be different. It's a good idea. Well, I first ask my students to give some feedback to me and to the other students about performance, about what they liked or didn't really like, what should be improved. And then I give them my feedback. Well, there are certain criteria that I want to assess. But definitely this has to be fun, so I don't really want to be too strict and so, well, this kind of thing. Well, to cut the long story short, so there are different kind of benefits of role-playing that we've discussed today. And if you'd like to have a very short look at some more examples, which are not created by me, but by some teachers who have taken my course on how to create multi-episode role-plays, here are some of them. Just very briefly, Katerina Sivertseva created, well, an extension of the Game of Thrones book, not series, for her university students and St. Petersburg State University for really high levels academic English course. And that's not a simple dramatization of what there was in the book. So these are different. The scenarios are slightly different, and that was really interesting. Varvara Kurilova, who teaches Russian to American students in an American university, created a role-playing game for A1, A2 Russian students of Russian, which is really amazing. And she did it with them, and the feedback was, well, tremendously good. She said she didn't really expect her low-level students to be so happy. This one is another low-level kind of, it's a game for low-level Russian students who are actually Finnish native speakers, created by Natalia Kazakova. It's all about working in an office, negotiating dates of projects and so on, extension on project dates, which was amazing for me since it was for teenagers aged 14 to 16 years old with quite a low level of Russian. She did it with them. It was good. Right, so, and this is what we did as part of the course, which ran once and which I'm going to run again in autumn, how to create role-playing games. So if I may, if you're interested, I'd like to invite you, because if you feel that you will be very busy taking a course in autumn, well, you can do it in summertime. And the promo code, my promo here at the bottom, will knock down the price for you for the summertime. Well, thank you very much. And if you have any questions, I'll be really happy to discuss them with you.
Okay, thank you, Marina.
Yes,
Yes,
thank you.
You've got some either questions or comments.
Larissa says she envies my students. No need to go to England to reach a high level of English. Well, thank you very much. How do you cope with the workload during this role play? Thank you, Natalia. If a person takes a receptionist role, his activities and vocabulary are limited to some particular phrases, while a sales manager might perform a presentation, which is much more. Thank you. Performing a presentation is not one of the targets here, because we practice only informal communication and we don't actually do the presentations. We do what happens in between the business events in this particular the one. But as you understand, and you show it in this question, there is a lot of potential for this scenario to branch out into the business, like activities, presentations, negotiations, but that's for later. I might extend it. And then I have to think out how to balance the game in such a way that one person, like this receptionist, doesn't have to say only some basic phrases and that's it. That's why I create quite a few conflict situations or challenges where the receptionist will be the key figure to help others out. So there will be quite a lot of communication there. Somebody forgetting documents or being late and so on. Right. Thank you.
I put some links for your events in the chat. I think on Tuesday you're running an event in Russian, yeah?
Yes.
And the link to Marina's course in September, in autumn. Okay.
Yes. Yes. Thank you very much. Well, Maya asks, can we have again the course data, please? Maybe this one. And in the chat, Yelena has already given the direct clickable link. The link here on the slide is different, but it will take you to exactly the same page, in fact.
I took it just from our table we created. So what we decided to do, so many people start talking about games and teaching how to play games and how to make games, but I've been in games for like 7 or 8 games. I've been making games for 8 years, and I can say who is a good game designer, who is not a good game designer, and we decided to make some kind of coalition. Piotr Stepichev, Marina Bocharova, Natalia Podubna, and of course some other game designers will join us, and we want to promote this idea of good educational games for our students. Which are efficient and fun to play.
Yes. Thank you very much. I can see one more question, but if there is no time, I'll just answer it in writing in the chat.
Okay,
about enthusiasm. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Bye.
Marina, please. Okay.
Thank you.
There is something wrong went with the mute.
Okay, I'll survive it. That's fine. It was great pleasure.
Okay. Dash, we still can't hear the sound. Okay, but you can see, Marina, you can see our work close to you. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I hope to meet you again, to see you again in our new, at our new events. Yeah, and everybody said, what a sound of the voice and how beautiful your English language is. Okay.
Oh, thank you very much.
Okay, so, and now we are ready. Okay, I will stop the record.